All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Boris. My last name is Eastern European, so we're going to skip that. So I'm here to chat with y'all about Zero Trust and how to kind of start that journey and the two tools that I think are useful Istio and Kyverno. I am a Principal Solutions Architect / Chief Wrencher and Plumber at Nirmata, the creators of Kyverno. In my previous life, I worked for Tetrate, which are kind of pretty closely tied to the creation and maintenance of Istio. So I figured why not marry the two and figure out how to tell the story of Zero Trust. Let's get going. All right. First and foremost, there's kind of 4 pillars that you're trying to accomplish with Zero Trust. You're trying to create trustless verification. You're trying to utilize things like certificates for workload identities instead of IP addresses. We have to shift away from kind of the more traditional layer 4 mindset and kind of shift up the stack to layer 7. Because we are able to shift to certificate-based authorization, you're now able to extend that to service-to-service communications, but also service to API, et cetera. Next up, microsegmentation, right? Network firewalls is what we all are familiar with. Think of it as that, but on steroids, right? It is a much more granular resource available to you, allowing you to emphasize limiting lateral movement. And when we get to kind of a test scenario, or if you think about XZ from this week or last week, lateral movement becomes very, very important, and limiting that becomes kind of a highly emphasis point for this. Next, we have least privilege, right? Just creating a need-to-know basis for what is happening with both internal components, but also all of the kind of communication patterns within your apps and clusters is paramount to limit the attack surface. And then last, continuous monitoring. I think we're all probably just inundated with log data, with trace data, with graph data. Unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. That's a completely separate talk that I have. You know, we have to be better at utilizing that data, and maybe since we already have Gen AI on the board, that's something that it will help us with. If you believe, you know, what comes out on your LinkedIn feed or on every other conference track out there. But it is a necessary evil that you need in order to ultimately be able to prove that, hey, I'm taking a zero trust stance and I am actually in a zero trust stance. All right. So, like, why does the cloud need this, right? We've shifted from servers to now spot instances, to serverless, to obviously containers, to who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, right? Everything is constantly shifting. Before, we had a much more defined, hey, my world exists here. Now I can cross the globe, I can cross zones, I can cross regions, I can be anywhere at any point in time. Obviously, as all of this has evolved and introduced complexities for us, the operators, attackers are not sitting on their hands, right? They are evolving new tools, new techniques, and ultimately bypassing kind of the regular traditional defenses that we have in place, whether it's network firewalls, whether it's, you know, I'm going to throw out Prisma. I'm not calling out Prisma for any particular reason. That's just the first tool that comes to mind. But, like, you know, the traditional tooling for defense is just not enough anymore. So because of all of this kind of dynamic existence of our new resources, zero trust as a model and as a practice fits really, really well. Security is baked in when done right. And because everything is based on identity and we're tracking to create controls based on identity, it ultimately fits really, really well. All right, but what does this matter to any and all of us, right? No matter how you slice it, defects cost money. Like that is, we all like to think that we're technologists and we work for technology companies creating these new tools, but at the end of the day, we are trying to provide some sort of monetary value. And the CNCF did a great blog about 2 years back that put an actual number to these defects. So whether it's a breach, whether it's something that you missed in your GitOps pipeline, whatever it is, $15,000 per defect is a lot of money. Now scale that to however many clusters you're currently running. It gets very pricey very, very quickly. Oh, there we go. All right, so let's kind of dive in. To the rescue, Istio and Kyverno. First, Istio. It is a cloud native networking, security, and observability tool. It decouples the control plane from the data plane, which then gives you the ability to create the ABAC and the authorization controls that I've been alluding to, and the management of those much more accessible. One of the kind of the biggest wins that I got with all of my clients when I was focusing on Istio was the simplicity with which you get encryption MTLS out of the box, right? That's a big win for just about anybody. The simplicity with which you're able to kind of control, invalidate, et cetera, those certificate identities becomes very, very important. On the other hand, we have Kyverno. What is Kyverno? Kyverno is a kube native policy engine. We're in the same space with Gatekeeper and OPA. What we kind of focus on with Kyverno, though, is to make policies YAML-based so they can sit next to both your application manifest, but also in Git with your code, and ultimately enable you to write a policy once and be able to use it across your entire fleet of services, code, infrastructure as code, Git pipelines for cost management or for attack prevention, et cetera. It is a webhook-based engine. We are able to both validate resources within your Kubernetes cluster. We're able to mutate them. We're able to generate them, which give it a lot of power. All right, so let's dive into Istio first and why I think it's the right tool for all of this. I already mentioned this, but MTLS or mutual TLS is way more powerful than people give it credit for, mostly because, again, it kind of comes out of the box very quickly, and people don't kind of pay it too much attention. However, with this, the certificates-based authorization or authentication and ultimately authorization that you get for every instance within your system is highly desirable. You get encryption at rest and in transit, very, very important, obviously. And because key management is decoupled for you, you can now integrate with AWS, Venafi, whatever your actual key management tooling is. You now just have to plug it in, and you decide that, hey, today I want to invalidate all of my keys. It's a single click versus, okay, for anybody that has ever had to roll certificates, you know how painful that can be at scale. Istio handles that for you. All right. As I said, IPs are a thing of the past. It's obviously a necessary evil. However, we can't use it for identification anymore. Things change so fast. We need to tie workload identities instead of subnets or whatever it may be to our policies. Because we are now able to decouple away from an IP and to a certificate, we can now, move further away from, or much easily enter, say, a deny all stance and create a granular control for what that means. Why do these organization policies matter? Both at the network level and later on at the kernel level, you can now define what a service should do, right? If I have a read-only service that all of a sudden is trying to run a delete or a read or whatever it may be, you now have that data in audit logs, obviously in application logs, etc., which gets me back to the later on or earlier rant about we have too much data, how do we sift through it? But keep marching. So beyond just the security aspect of this, Istio gives you Canary, Istio gives you layer 7 routing rules rather than layer 4 routing rules, gives you circuit breaking. All of this kind of comes out of the box and makes it extremely, extremely simple. The number of, again, services and folks that I've worked with that wanted A, MTLS, but B, to be able to do blue-green deployments, Istio is definitely a really easy tool to accomplish that. And at the end of the day, how does this all tie in, right? Because we have all the load balancing tools, because we have everything in a mesh, I can now section off and cordon off components within my app that are deemed no longer safe. In a second, we'll see how that can be done automatically. But because everything is now tied in, no matter where it is, it has a proper certificate identity, I can go, hey, this section of my service mesh is misbehaving. My app doesn't have to feel the effect. It can actually just get cordoned off and broken off. All right, so Kyverno. As I said at the start, everything is a YAML. I think we're all YAML jockeys. If it's not on your LinkedIn profile, please add it. I'm trying to make it a thing. But end of the day, I think we are all just writing YAML, which means that the more tools that fit within that paradigm, my life is easier when I stare at the blank page, right? Rather than trying to figure out a new programming language, new scripting language in order to write my policy, whatever it may be. It also allows non-technical people to access policy making. Why is that important? A lot of the times, I think we've all experienced it, is the business unit says, hey, we would like this decision to be made about applications. And you are now tasked to create the code or create the policy within the app. What if you can actually go, hey, here's a YAML file that's pretty self-readable. You write the policy. I will then utilize it across my, again, full pipeline, everything from my code repository all the way down to the actual application. Again, very, very powerful to shift both left and shift and enable your organization to be able to reuse thought leadership that comes out from different teams that are not the tech department, right? Scoping, where you can scope on everything that is built into a kube cluster, but you can also scope it to CRDs, which again, very, very important, right? We all live in CRD land as well these days. Everything is a CRD. Everybody is creating their own definition of what the world should look like. Being able to control it, being able to guardrail it with the same engine out of the box, very, very important. All right. So I said earlier that we can both validate and mutate. Why is this important, right? If you have a Zero Trust assumes that somebody's already in your network. If somebody's trying to, say, change a deployment configuration, the validation policies and the validation webhook will prevent that and consistently keep your resources in the state that you have defined. So no matter the number of changes they try to make or how they try to break out of the jail, the validation webhook will always bring that object back in line with what it's supposed to be. On the other hand, we have mutation. Why is mutation important? That means that I can look at an object, like, so as I said earlier, we have service mesh, I have a section that I need to cordon off. I can now write a policy that automatically mutates my Istio config files that go take that chunk out for me. Right? I don't have to worry about, okay, how do I deploy the configs? How do I do whatever it is? You can just write a 4-line policy that, say, matches on labels, and everything in US East 1 will go down again forever, as it seems to do every once a year. So we're due for another down soon, huh? I had to take the pot shot. I'm sorry. All right. So further on, generation. Like, why is generation important? One of the things that I work on with folks a lot is label-based policy building. So you can define your Istio service mesh, and then you can define, hey, if certain applications have certain labels, and this is just an example, it can be any field within the object that says this should have these routing rules generated for them. I can just read a label and then actually automatically generate all the necessary Istio configs on the fly for every cluster that we want to do this for. And then further on, there was already a track today on SBOMs as an example in supply chain. There was a great talk yesterday. SBOMs are coming. I believe that is what was said yesterday. I will repeat it. SBOMs are coming, and XZ has only made that very pertinent and necessary. Not that it wasn't before, but like it has highlighted the need for it. But being able to create a supply chain, being able to integrate with Trivi or back to Prisma or whoever your vulnerability scanner is, and make decisions and generate policies based on those decisions and that information, important. I think I did beat this slide a bit to death, but telemetry and logging, we all hate it, and it's all necessary. Without it, you are never going to be able to prove that you are indeed in a zero trust stance. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to prove a whole lot of other things as well. I will highlight again, we need better tools to sift through the copious amounts of data that Istio and Envoy just by itself can generate, let alone anything else that runs on a cluster. All right, so I made this slide before and submitted, can confirm that before XZ happened. But let's imagine that an attacker, injects some malicious code into a third-party dependency. I should have added, I think if everybody has seen the XKCD comic with like a tiny block holding up the whole structure, that's exactly what happened yet again. It is going to happen. It will continue to happen. It is not an isolated incident, right? But how would a zero trust stance help in this case, right? First, because we're using, again, MTLS, I now have authorization data, and I can invalidate any services that I deem vulnerable to XZ. I can invalidate their certificates, which in turn invalidates their access to the service mesh, which drops them off automatically. Say the vulnerable nodes or containers are broken into, Kyverno can, you can utilize policies within Kyverno to block any actual system level access, or at the very least get the necessary tracing data to see what was reached by an attacker. Furthermore, again, telemetry. You need that data, but you also need to be able to read it. All right. So if we look at Istio, it is many things, but at the end of the day, it is a network tool. It defines our network perimeter. Marrying it to Kyverno allows you to enforce the security and best practices within your service mesh, within your kind of infrastructure. So if Istio controls the outside borders, Kyverno controls the inside. The telemetry is needed, I think, ultimately, so you can answer the question, who did what, why, and when? I'm missing the when, but those questions end up being asked, whether you're going through compliance checks, whether you're going through, postmortems, those questions need to be answerable, right? And because of kind of the reporting structure that both Istio have and Kyverno have, you can actually produce, hey, I am operating in zero trust, which becomes important if you're dealing with PCI or you're dealing with any of the, NIST 800 or 200 series verifications, etc. All right, I'm good on time. So in summary, how should you start? This might be a little controversial, but standing up book info or a guest book is not a test of service mesh. That, you need to actually have stakeholders, and in order to do that, you need to start with a high value target, high value workload. That is the only way you're going to make your kind of company, stakeholders, whoever it is, care. Showing a book info running in service mesh is great for a 5-second flashy lights, not very useful when you scale it to a complex architecture, right? And as you're working, I'm not proposing put this in production immediately, but as you're testing with a high value target, learn. We all as technologists have to be lifelong learners, but unless you're comfortable with how Istio works, unless you're comfortable with how Kyverno works, you're never going to be comfortable running a system that incorporates both tools or any other tool, really. So best way to learn for me has always been, okay, I guess let me solve the blank page problem. Let me go bang my head against the wall, right? From there, iterate, and gradually work with how policies should be defined, how Istio configs, and what pieces of the Istio objects are necessary for my policy writing. Just keep iterating on that. And then outside of all of this, just keep up with what is happening in the world, right? XZ popped up on Hacker News probably about 2.5 weeks before it popped up on LinkedIn. Stay informed. You just have to stay informed. And with that, I think I'm at about time. I think I